Okay, so welcome to RevoWorks. We're just going to run you through some bits going on in the workshop today. We've got a Premier Civic Type R here, and we've done a strip down. We are going to be changing the inlet manifold and throttle body, and we're going to put an RBC onto this. So we've taken all the manifold off this morning, and we have got it all laid out at the back here, waiting for us to start assembling it. So we've got the old stock manifolds here. This runs a 65mm intake stock throttle body. That's waiting to be disassembled. We're about to start that in just a second. And we have got this shiny new RBC which has come in, waiting to go onto this car. So it's bored out to 70mm. It's going to have a Skunk2 throttle body. This is the unit, very nice. Obviously adapter plate is required, so we're going to be using that as well, and we have set our bolts out and bits and pieces there ready to assemble it. Plenty of gaskets, new gaskets obviously. We've got some thermal gaskets as well which are going to be going onto that, and we will catch up with you in a bit to show you this assembled with all the sensors from the old throttle body. See you soon. So when it comes to the throttle body, you need to take off the throttle position sensor. These bolts are blanked off because they break the heads off when they assemble it in the factory. So get a Dremel and cut a little slot into the end of those, and that'll make it easy to pop out with a standard flathead screwdriver. Okay, we're back at the shop now. I apologise about the bad hair, by the way. I wasn't going to be doing any videos today. We are getting on quite well with these inlet manifolds, so I'll just show you how we're getting on. So old inlet manifold is all stripped down, throttle body stripped down, shall I say. Certain parts are taken off. We don't need the purge solenoids, that's going to stay off of it. We have blanked off the position on the new manifold for that, so we don't need that one. I did say earlier on about the bolts where we just put a little notch in those, but if you can see that, it makes it a bit easier to take those off. That's for the throttle position sensor, so just cut in there with a Dremel. You can use a normal screwdriver to take it off. All of the bolts from the original manifold, we don't use those, we replace them with new hardware. And this is the new one set up ready to go onto the vehicle. So it's got the adapter plate all fitted, and as I said, the blanking bung in there, which we don't need that air line there, so that's all blanked off. And the new throttle body, which is a Skunk2 throttle body with all of the sensors attached. As you can see, we've used new bolts. We do get a little bit obsessed with putting marks on everything so that we know they're all torqued correctly. And you've got the throttle position sensor on there. We've used Allen key bolts on this, so it can be adjusted when we take it to the mappers if we need to adjust that at all. And obviously your idle control valve all at the bottom there, and your water intake and all that sort of stuff. So next stage for all of this is to attach it to the car, get the manifold on the car, and using the thermal gasket and the new bolts and bits and pieces there, we'll get that all assembled as well. You also need an extended hose. This comes from our supplier, so it's a genuine Honda part. We will be using all new hose clips as well, and I'll show you that in a little bit when we get to the vehicle, because there's a load of those which are rusty and we don't like to see that in the engine bay, so we'll get that all sorted. We'll get back to you in a little bit. Okay, so I've got Dad back in now because he's not skiving off today, and we have finished the Civic Type R, so I'm going to talk you through that. As you can see, I've put more effort into my hair today. This is the wax I'm using in case you're interested, and I also use this brush, which is a particularly good brush. Anyway, that's just a side note. So we'll talk you through what's happening with the car, show you what I've done so far. So I'm just going to pinch the phone off with my dad, and we will have a look. So the job's all completed now. We have got the manifold installed. I'm just going to talk you through, probably from airbox round, so you can see everything we've got in here. So we're using Tegawa carbon airbox, and this is accompanied with a Tegawa intake hose. This has had a lot of modification to make it fit with this particular throttle body and assembly, so we can show you the bits we've cut off of that in a second. We use a thermal gasket and the mounting plate, so that's the adapter plate to be able to accommodate that. Intake manifold is an RBC with a 70mm intake. You have the extended hose, so that obviously it will reach, because it's normally mounted over this direction, so that's all done and dusted on this. It has quite a lot of modification on the front slam panel here. Loads of people know about this anyway. There's different ways to try and do it. You can sort of try and fold this piece back, the metal piece, but we found that the best way of doing it is to cut the section out. So we cut this back and then we paint it with a zinc coating to stop it from rusting underneath. That's all done, and then we use this nice rubber strip there just as an extra way of tidying it up, and also obviously stops it banging if there was any of that happening. That shouldn't happen in this application because we're running some Fibertechnics engine mounts. That's what the customers opted. That was a job we did a little while ago, and we'll talk you through a bit more detail about that when we do the walkthrough of the car in a second. So that's pretty much everything we did under here. Loads of custom work underneath with the cabling. Cables have to be extended quite far to get to this. So what we've done is taken the plastic housing off, which is what covers up the existing cables, and then we've put some new conduit on there. It's the same as factory OEM, and that's all been sealed back in, so it looks like OEM wires underneath. We'll show you the conduit in a second as well, and we'll show you the hardware at the back of the shop. We've got loads of new clips all the way around. Bolts and bits and pieces have changed. We changed the plastic push clips as we go. If any of those break, we don't put them back in. We stick brand new ones of those, and that's pretty much everything to talk about at this end. We will catch up at the back of the shop in just a second. Okay, so we're at the back of the workshop. I'm going to talk you through everything we've laid out on the side here. This is the bits and pieces we took off, and it'll give us some props to tell you some of the stuff going on inside the car. So I'm going to nick the phone once more, and we will go and have a look at what's happening. So we have got the old intake manifold. All of the old stuff gets returned to the customer. So the old throttle body Swiss with all the hardware and bits and pieces that go in there, that's all been replaced. This is the strip that we use to edge the slam panel, so that finishes that job nicely. This is the conduit I was talking about earlier in the front of the store. This is what we used to recover all of the cables that we exposed when we took off this plastic housing. Basically the situation is that the plastic housing drops the cable down, which then means it goes too tight basically to get to the throttle body. So we need the cable to come out of here. So instead of chopping any of this up, we opt to take it out, and then we put it into new housing here, and that's all attached underneath nicely. So you wouldn't really know that's been done. These are additional bits of plastic cable cover that we take off. That's at the front around the radiator area, so that comes off. I think it attaches where the battery is. Hoses that aren't used anymore. So you've got the different hoses here. One of those was the extended hose we discussed about, and some water hoses which are redundant, and then the return solenoid hose as well, which is redundant now. We've got the bits of the intake hose that we had to cut off. It's quite a lot. It puts it at the wrong angle because the RBC and the throttle body tip back so far in towards the airbox. So this section has to be cut off to get a really nice clean line, and it stops the hose collapsing. So that was what came off of there. That's all done and dusted now. This is the bit which is quite a big chunk taken out of that slam panel. Not for the faint-hearted. That we just cut that with a multi-tool, just chop that off, and then that was obviously the edge that's exposed from the cutting gets treated with a zinc painting and that sort of stuff. In here, this isn't that exciting. It's all the old bolts and rusty bits and pieces we don't use anymore. Obviously this hefty bit of chunk of metal is what holds the original manifold on. That isn't used anymore, so that all comes off. On this particular vehicle, which is actually only a 2006 model, the lower bolt was seized solid, so that was a right pain for us to get it out. It's in here somewhere. It's not that exciting, it's only a bolt anyway. But we managed to get that off and then remove all those bits and pieces. All the brackets, so the brackets that would have been used to hold those plastic cable housings, so that's all gone. And then you've got your brackets here for the top where the rocker cover, you have the plastic cover over the top, so that's all been taken off now, we don't use that. Interestingly, this is the bracket that holds the throttle cable, and we're not using it anymore because the routing was so poor. It was just too tight, so we've taken that off and then routed it in a smoother route. We'll probably show you that in the engine bay in just a second, so you get an idea what's happening with that. So that's all those bits and pieces back here. This is how we've opted to do the throttle cable. So it attaches down there onto the new throttle body, and then it loops round. Normally the bracket would be here somewhere, so it comes up, so it pulls this back too tight. So we've just brought it around in a nice smooth arc, and then we've just attached it to the air conditioning pipe which goes across the back there. If we didn't have the air conditioning, because it had an air conditioning delete, we would pick up on these points and probably use some P-clips that would go in there quite nicely and mount that out of the way. So that would be quite a nice option to get the cable out of the way there. So you've probably noticed on this particular car the rocker cover is in pretty bad repair. Everyone knows they do it, and it's all peeling off. Don't panic about that. Obviously the engine base has a load of work done to it. We're going to have this replaced. We do an exchange on this, so we've got the replacement rocker cover here. We've done the paint stripping on this already. This will go next door and be painted shortly, and it'll go back on. We're going to do it in Type R Cherry Red.